Let's see what the news has in store for us this week. So, co-pilot first. So, top alternative media UK news stories from the past 7 days. Surprise, surprise, politics is at the top of the heap. So, politics and power shifts. Andy Burnham becomes the UK Prime Minister. Burnham formally took office after meeting King Charles, replacing Keir Starmer. Alternative outlets emphasised the scale of the political shift and Burnham's framing of his arrival as the most significant change moment in our politics for 40 years. And Burnham has framed his arrival that way. I wouldn't put it that way. I wouldn't say it was the most significant change moment in our politics for 40 years. I would suggest that the most significant change moment in our politics over the last 40 years was when they successfully managed to oust Corbyn from the Labour Party. That would be my argument. I think he was a man of the people. The people loved him, especially when he came to Newcastle. He came and he gave one of his speeches in Newcastle, and it was ramajama packed. It was packed. Tons of people came out to see him. We are notoriously a Labour kind of area. Like Labour's been in power in the northeast for a long, long time. But yes, so when it comes to Durham miners and all things like that, people really did favour Labour. But as you know, that all turned around over the last few months when we had our local elections, and Labour lost a lot of their seats because of the policies that they brought in that nobody wanted, weren't part of their mandate when they went to get elected. And yeah, so a lot of people have turned when it comes to Labour, especially in the northeast. I think one of the most cringeworthy things that I've seen, and I've dipped into social media over this because it is a massive thing. One of the most cringeworthy things that I've seen are all the crawling politicians who are fawning over Starmer and his reign and how wonderful he was and what amazing things he did and how they were so fortunate to have worked with such a powerful leader. And it's absolutely gag-worthy to see. It's all over X. I don't really go on Facebook. It's not a platform that I ever really enjoyed. I have a personal Facebook, and I do have the Sarah Waite side of Facebook as well, so from a professional point of view. So I do post on the Sarah Waite professional page, but I don't tend to go onto my personal Facebook very often. But that means that I don't really go through my feed. I schedule posts to come up on my professional page, and I leave the feed alone because the feed is just full of crud. And X is becoming the same. Like I say, all these politicians fawning over Starmer and how wonderful he was and how he achieved so much. And where would we have been without him? Where would we have been without him indeed? It's a very good question. I knew this would come up. Burnham to scrap digital IDs and expand North Sea drilling. So you would expect me to be sitting here going, hooray, 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 hooray. Like two things that I said: scrap digital ID, hence the digital bill of rights that I I haven't put in place. I'm not empowered to do that. But the digital bill of rights that I came up with, and if you haven't seen that, check that out on my Wednesday research hub. And I should be happy that he's choosing to scrap the digital ID. But is he? Is he really? Is he really scrapping the digital ID, or is he paying lip service to a whole country of people that are screaming no to it? And I think it's the latter. I think that all the things that are existing, that are in place at the moment, all the existing digital ID mandates that have been put in, so all the CEOs of the big companies who were told that they had to have digital ID in place for their employees. And if you wanted to get a job in a company, you had to have a digital ID. It's done. In order to work in this country, you have to be able to have a digital ID. Is that being scrapped? Is that being walked back? No, that's not being walked back. So what he's actually saying is he's not going to talk about it anymore. He's going to leave all the digital ID that's already in place. So you still have to opt out of having a digital ID on your passport. You still have to opt out of having a digital ID when it comes to your driving license. And it will still incrementally come about. And they are still looking at curtailing their under 16s on social media and you having to prove that you're over 16. They have said that if you have been on social media, if you've been on social media for a long period of time and your account has been active for a long period of time, i.e. over 16 years, which mine has. I mean, I went onto social media in 2009. So, yeah, 17 years. So the bottom line is, that's right, isn't it? 19, yeah, 17 years. My maths head wasn't working then. So obviously I won't have to prove. However, if you are new to social media, you will have to prove your age. You will have to have your age verified in some way, shape or form. And that won't be stopped. So he's not scrapping digital ID. He is paying lip service to a country that's screaming because he knows that if a general election is called, he won't stay where he is. He's not even been elected. Like he's been patted on the head by the billionaire puppet masters and said, oh, he'll do. He'll follow what we want him to do because he has in the past. And if you care to look at Burnham's past, which I'm doing a bit of a dive into at the moment. So if you care to look at Burnham's past, I would say, and that past deeds dictate what you can expect from somebody in the future. And so far, what I found on his past deeds is not so great. But we will bring that to you as part of some research. So Epoch Times reports Burnham will abandon digital ID plans and announce new North Sea drilling initiatives as part of his early agenda. And I did say that, we've got oil in the North Sea. Why are we not drilling it? Why are we relying on different countries when we have our own resources in our own country? So I should be jumping up and down and praising the man. But once you'd start doing a bit of a dive into him, he's not all he's cracked up to be. Westminster's quiet revolution, backbench bills gaining traction. Weekly Record highlights how private members' bills are reshaping social policy faster than government legislation, a trend largely ignored by mainstream outlets. Private members' bills are reshaping social policy faster than government legislation. Interesting. Nigel Farage's 5 million crypto billionaire gift controversy deepens. We knew it would deepen because there's more people who are looking into it from the alternative media side, much to his disgust, I think. InView reports Farage sought £1 million a year compensation before receiving a £5 million gift, raising questions about political finance and influence. Farage, in the kind of eyes of the people, is not the man he purported to be. He's just as corrupt as all the other politicians, and of course he is, otherwise he wouldn't be in the position he's in. So we know that he's corrupt, but the depth of his corruption is beginning to show. It just seems that there isn't one politician that isn't corrupt in some way, shape or form. And if they're not corrupt, like Corbyn, I've never done a deep dive on Corbyn. He always came across as a genuine man and his principles always seemed to be in place. So of course he couldn't continue in politics. Governance, policy and public spending. The COVID inquiry, PPE procurement wasted billions. InView reports the inquiry found Tory ministers gave favourable treatment to politically connected firms during pandemic procurement. Now, I have covered the inquiry, part 1 and part 2 of the inquiry, and there are 10 parts to the inquiry, and I was waiting for the third part when it came to PPE to come out to bring to you as part of the Research Hub. So that will be upcoming from me. However, I don't think they're telling us anything we didn't already know. We knew that the PPE procurement had wasted a lot of money. We also knew, and it was called a conspiracy theory, that it was planned. It was a plandemic. People call it convid. And of course they do. Of course they do. At the time, I wasn't particularly happy about any of it. And I brought that to you, and all of my YouTube videos got taken down. I have since asked them to put them back up, and they have, but I've taken them off because we've taken a different tack. But yeah, we didn't buy it at the time, and we knew that this was just a way to set the wealth gap even wider than it was. And they made tons of money out of it. They made tons of money. UK lobbyists push Burnham for an oil field that creates barely any jobs. The Canary reports lobbying pressure for a new oil field despite minimal employment benefits. Well, I haven't seen anything about that. Thames Water preparing to fight Burnham amid nationalisation rumours. Alternative reporting suggests escalating tensions between the utility giant and the incoming government. Well, there will be escalating contentions because Thames Water are awful. They were told not to give bonuses, big bonuses, to their big bosses. And it was actually put in place that they weren't legally allowed to. And Thames Water completely ignored it and gave, even though they are not doing their job very well at all, and even though they are creating more pollution in our local rivers and waters, they still gave losses, which means our water bills have to rise. They still managed to give out a load of money to their CEOs. They circumvented it by utilising some clause, but that's not the point. So it will be interesting to watch that, because that will have a knock-on effect for yours and my water bills. Society, culture and identity, the new British identity. Post-Brexit belonging redefined. Weekly Record 6-month investigation explores how communities across the UK are reshaping identity beyond borders and alignment politics. I'll tell you what I think is reshaping our identity. Our government. Our government are reshaping our identity, because our government are putting things in to this country. Digital ID, I'm going to use that as an example because I don't believe it's gone away. And I don't believe Andy Burnham. I don't believe Andy Burnham because he's a Blairite. Starmer was Blairite 2.0, and Burnham is exactly the same. And what's Blair's biggest thing? He wants a digital ID. He wants the 2030 control mechanism in place. So Burnham, I believe, will not stop the digital ID. But the knock-on effect of all of this, and it gives me joy to say this, is when we look at politics, we always look and it's far left, it's far right, it's centrist. But there are some topics that cross the divide. There are some topics that are unacceptable regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum. And I don't know where I stand on the political spectrum. There are things that I believe are wrong and I talk about them, and you know that because I bring it to you. And there are things that I believe that are right that should be put in place. But I'm not sure where that puts me on the political spectrum, and I wish there wasn't one, because I think a lot of our problems in this country can actually be directed up to the politicians, the puppeticians who have their strings pulled by the billionaire puppet masters that want the whole global economy to be a certain way. So all countries must pull in line. Well, the citizens in these countries, UK, all around the world, are not happy about that. Nobody wants digital ID globally. So it's crossing the divide, and it's bringing us together, and it's giving power to the people, because we are the people who keep them where they are. And at the last World Economic Forum that they held, the top brass at the World Economic Forum, non-elected people who dictate what happens in all the different countries in the around the globe, they actually stood and said, it doesn't matter what we want. If the people aren't in line and don't want it, then we have a problem. And not only that, we've lost favour. So we can shout at the rooftops as much as we like about what we think should happen. But if the people won't have it, they won't have it. And that, I think, is what the new British identity is. People are beginning to look at their neighbour who they used to fight with because they didn't hold the same political view, and are finding out that they actually have an awful lot more in common when it comes to looking at corrupt systems. And Joe Schmo public like you and I are sick to the back teeth of lies, corruption, lobbying, and our politicians effectively moving towards things that benefit other countries and not the UK. This is happening in America. It's happening all around the globe. And some savvy politicians in different countries are cottoning on and are changing. Look at Spain. Look at how the citizens of Spain stood firm and said, we do not want the Israeli lobbying in our country, and we will not allow, being a major port, we will not allow any goods to go through our port. And they stopped, they downed arms. They downed and they went, no, we're not doing it. And their prime minister or their governor listened. And that, I think, is what our new British identity is moving and morphing into. The political divide feels completely insignificant when you look at the bigger picture, and people are waking up to the fact that we are being gaslit by our politicians. Poetry and spoken word revival. Weekly Record notes a surge in spoken word culture, with grassroots venues driving a renaissance in political and social expression. Yeah, people are speaking about how they feel because they've taken our right to protest away. You can protest, but you've got to be allowed. You have to have it passed. And if they deem it no, so what other way do we express ourselves? Like, if we were having silent protests, so people were just holding placards and they were getting carted off and classed at, well, they were getting carted off as terrorists at the age of over 70. So what other way do we have of saying what we feel and how we feel? Spoken word. Does not surprise me that poetry and spoken word revival is there, because where there's a will, there's a way. And where there's power to the people, there's a way. And together we rise. And spoken word and poetry is one of the most beautiful and non-controllable forms of self-expression. If you're doing a poem, the content of that poem can really impact other people. And if the content of that poem is talking about how you feel about the current situations, whether it be political, social expression, then it's going to be heard. It's going to be heard by the people, and the people are going to rally behind it. And it will be our poets. And I mean, England is famous for people who can use the spoken word in a form that can move people. So yeah, and I think that sits hand in hand with our new identity. They are trying to curtail us. They are trying to control us. They are imposing a dictatorial state in this country, and the people are cottoning on. Young Greens co-chairs will be anti-Zionist. The Canary reports on ideological shifts within youth political leadership. And this is another thing that I'm really pleased Co-Pilot has brought up. When we talk about the under 16s ban, I was talking to a friend about this during the week. When we talk about the under 16s ban, I sat and I said to her, look, when I was a kid, if my curfew time was 9 o'clock in the evening, then anything shenanigans wise that I was going to get up to, I just got up to before 9 o'clock because that was my curfew. And one of the things that you never like to hear when you're a child, and I don't class adolescents as children, but I am aware that the, let's say 14, 15, 16-year-old brain is not fully matched with the endorphins and the chemical messengers that go running through the body. But one of the things that you have to be very careful of saying to adolescents is you cannot. So if you try to curb them, they will find a way around it. And they're not buying the Israeli bullshit anymore. And I saw something on, it was a Jewish forum actually that I saw it on, and they were bringing it up in their talk because there's Holocaust training in Israel, and it's all off the back of never again, never again, never again will what happened to the Jewish people ever happen again. And the Jewish youth in Israel, a lot of them, according to this Jewish lady who teaches, have turned around and said, but okay, yeah, we understand the never again, but what does that make what we're doing in Gaza? And questioning the narrative that they're told. The lady said that the Holocaust teachings have been almost too good because their youth are looking at that as a standard. Well, that's absolutely unacceptable. So why are we doing what we're doing? If that's unacceptable, then surely this has to be unacceptable as well. Our actions in modern day. And yeah, and I would say that the under 16s ban is a way to curtail our youth from gaining access to information that the puppeteers would rather they didn't see. Because when you go to school, you're funneled to, you have to believe this, you have to go into, like, all of the teaching in our school system is to make you a productive gopher for society, so that you fit in to the productive end of society as being a citizen. So you have to contribute. You have to contribute. Can't be a free thinker. School doesn't really teach free thinking. It teaches curbing. And this is what we need you to know. And this is, you have to be a good, compliant little person to be able to be part of society, because that's what you have to do in order to keep the money people in money. Because if we did what Spain did and went no and did an all-out strike at our ports, and we all said no, not doing it, there's not a thing they could do. There's not a thing the politicians could do. So you can't teach children that. But of course, children have access to social media. Children have access to the internet. So they can completely circumvent anything they're taught at school, and they can find out for themselves. And we have a tendency to really not give adolescents their due when it comes to how they believe, how they feel, and what they think. And they're free thinkers, because my generation brought up a generation of free thinkers. And those free thinkers are now bringing up a generation of free thinkers, questioners, people who won't accept the political crap that we're fed and are asking, why? Why do I have to toe this line when I don't actually believe that? And they're much more vocal about doing it than we were when we were younger. So I have a lot of hope for our youth. So yeah, I love the fact that the Youth Greens co-chairs will be anti-Zionist, because we should not have Zionist influence in our politics at all. Full stop. Should not be there. Cannot serve two masters. Economy, energy and industry. Britain's hydrogen gamble. Teesside's 4.2 billion clean energy corridor. Teesside's just down the road from me. We run from the Northumberland to the Tees to the Tweed. So Teesside is just down the road. Weekly Record examines whether Teesside can become the new Rotterdam, balancing ambition with scepticism. Well, Teesside used to be famous. I mean, when you go a little bit further down from me, you get to places like Stockton. And the people of Stockton, we all have colloquial terms. They're smoggies. And I thought that was quite a derogatory term when I first moved up here. And I found out they were smoggies because I was calling them Geordies, and evidently they're not. You don't call them, you don't call them Geordies when you're in Stockton. And yeah, they're smoggies, and that's because of the industry that they used to have. So it was chemical plants. So it'll be interesting to see how that moves and what happens with that. The North Sea drilling plan again, incoming. Epoch Times frames Burnham's energy strategy as a pivot towards domestic extraction. There's going to be a lot of uproar about this. I don't really understand, because I've never really looked into it. I don't really understand why we stopped drilling. I would suggest it's probably something to do with money and lining the pockets of the global elite. Rather than being a country that's more self-sustainable, we have to rely upon other. No, I'm not going to use the word more powerful or the phrase more powerful, because I don't think other countries are more powerful. I think we give our power away to other countries by not utilising our own resources that we have freely available. So it could be a really good move. Crime investigation and accountability. Luxury prison cells flaunted on social media. Well, there's somebody that I can't remember who it was. Somebody turned around and said, "Oh, when I get old, when I become elderly, I'm going to commit a crime that's going to put me in prison, because I won't have to worry about anything then. I won't have to worry about paying exorbitant gas bills. I won't have to worry about paying exorbitant electric bills or exorbitant water rates. I won't have to worry about whether I can heat my house or feed myself, because I'll go into prison and I'll get all of it for nothing." And it did make me giggle, because it's wrong, but it's true. InView reports prisoners showing off contraband-filled student flat-style cells, raising questions about enforcement and prison culture. I would suggest that that's not a Cat A prison. That's not a Category A. Our prisons are categorised in different categories, and Category A is your top security. So I would suggest that's probably not happening in a top security prison. But we do also have, I think they're Cat D, which are basically open prisons, which are like camps. And they're more along the line of rehabilitation, because the idea is not to put somebody who is deemed as being like a petty criminal into a hardened environment where they could possibly learn more of a craft in criminality. Farage state security questions after the £5 million gift. The Canary highlights concerns about why Farage received state security following the crypto-funded donation. Like I say, this is definitely going to keep blowing up. Farage is not the man he purported to be, but not all of us were taken in by him. Non-obvious themes emerging across alternative outlets. So Burnham's rise is being framed as a systemic turning point. I don't agree. Not just a leadership change. I don't agree. Energy policy is the dominant cross-outlet narrative. So hydrogen corridors, drilling plans and oil field lobbying. And that's coming from Burnham, because he knows the people are sick and tired of relying on other countries, especially with the cost of gas and fuel at the moment. Political finance transparency is a recurring concern. So Farage, PPE, procurement, and identity politics and ideological shifts appear more prominently than in mainstream coverage. Of course, they won't put it in mainstream coverage. They don't want you to see these kind of things, do they? But even though we're looking at these kind of things, I'm still picking them apart. So that's Copilot. Now, obviously, we always go to Claude next, and we see what Claude has to say for his top story. Okay, so he says he's got enough to pull together a good roundup sourced from independent outlets. So here's the top UK news stories according to Claude. Andy Burnham becomes PM, so same as Copilot, top of the heap. And the cabinet fallout, the big one. Burnham was invited by King Charles III to form a government on the 20th of July following Keir Starmer's resignation after the 2026 Labour leadership election. Coverage from Open Democracy has focused less on the pageantry and more on who's advising him. Their investigation found Burnham's incoming Chief of Staff, James Purnell's lobbying firm, Flint Global, held extensive meetings with ministers and officials with minimal disclosure, having met officials from at least 9 government departments 38 times since Labour took office. Open Democracy has also been pushing Burnham to act on climate. For months, ministers have refused to publish a report on how the climate crisis will affect the UK, and Open Democracy argues Burnham must release it. Well, we've talked about the climate crisis and the fact that that's really uppermost because it makes the most money. It makes the most money. It is a huge money spinner for us to believe in the climate crisis. What I am more interested in, though, is how this just feels like a knock-on of Labour together. You know, the group that were digging up dirt and trying to frighten off researchers and journalists, the group that got together, the group that was McSweeney and Mandelson and all of the cronies that ousted Corbyn. And this lobbying firm of James Purnell feels it's got the stench of Labour together about it, just cloaked in a different stinky cloak, just wearing a different uniform. So it's a great way to start, isn't it? And that's going to be his Chief of Staff. Great. So already we're into treacherous waters. Lobbying firms. Outrageous. Reform UK scrutiny continuing. Byline Times has kept up its reform investigations. Their most eye-catching recent story, Nigel Farage's party proposed an amendment to the government's elections bill that would jail candidates for up to 6 months for using Irish or Scottish Gaelic on election leaflets. That's terrible. What's wrong with having Irish or Scottish Gaelic on election leaflets? And the justification for jailing them for 6 months is outrageous. They're also reported that Reform UK is now connected to multiple parliamentary and police investigations amid questions over its opaque crypto-connected funding, and separately investigated the figures behind an Elon Musk-backed far-right rival to Reform UK. I wonder if that's got anything to do with Tommy Robinson. I bet it has. But they're just serving a purpose again. Far right is what we discussed at the beginning of this. It's far right, far left, centrist. No. Look at the people who are controlling the money. Look at the people who are raking in the billions. They're the ones that we should be against. We should all be together. People standing together against the elites, as they would have themselves called, and rising up. Press freedom, the Canaries debanking saga. So this is continuing. I knew it would because it's huge. It's absolutely huge. If they can debank, I said last week and the week before, the powers that ought not to be have been trying to stop truthful media coverage. And the Canary has a massive following. They weren't successful in trying to dig up dirt. They weren't successful in trying to scare the journalists off. So they've totally taken their money away. This has been a running story across the independent media ecosystem. The Canary suspended its national print newspaper after just 2 weeks, which is a huge shame, saying Lloyds had closed its account and withheld funds, leaving it unable to pay all its staff. Lloyds told Press Gazette it does not comment on individual customer accounts. Yeah, of course it can't comment because it can't tell you who's dictating that the account was closed. And I I can hazard a guess, and I reckon it will have something to do with a foreign country. Other threads still running. Novara Media reports ministers met fossil fuel lobbyists 500 times in Labour's first year in power. Open Democracy published an investigation into the extent of femicide among victims aged over 66. Wow, that might be worth looking into from a health and wellbeing point of view. Obviously, Claude hasn't put it up on the main part of the news because for Claude, when I ask him for the week's rundown, he's looking at what he classes as the big stories. The fuel lobbyist 500 times in Labour's first year in power. That's to see how much money they can earn. That's what that's about. The fossil fuel lobbyists, and that will be James Parnell. Byline Times reported the BBC is sacking journalists while leaving layers of largely superfluous and expensive management in place, per a former BBC reporter. Yeah, why does that not surprise me? The BBC are panicking because the general public aren't interested in the BBC anymore because they know it's contrived, they know it's captured, just like our politicians are captured. The BBC, that people don't want to pay for it. Why would you pay for it? It's claptrap. Why would you pay for it? It's utter crap on the TV. Not that I've watched the TV for over 20 years, but I'm reliably informed. And now, after Claude, we'll ask Grok the same question. So the top UK news stories from the past 7 days, according to Grok. And again, as we expected, Andy Burnham's right up there at the top. Andy Burnham's rise and early Labour government actions. His rise. I think I'm going to look and go back to the origins and the original meanings of the word prime and the word minister and see if he fits. See if Burnham fits, especially after doing some research on his background and what's led him to where he is now. But I'll bring that to you. Andy Burnham has taken a central role, with reports of him becoming Labour leader Prime Minister around mid-July. Key moves include nationalisation of British Steel. The government took full public ownership of the loss-making Scunthorpe plant, previously under Chinese-owned Jingyai, via the Steel Industry Nationalism Act. Framed as protecting jobs and supply chains on national security grounds, China strongly criticised the move and indicated it would monitor and potentially respond. Okay, well, I think British Steel should be in British hands. So sorry, China, I don't have a problem with that. Scrapping plans for digital IDs. No, we're not buying it. We're not buying it. We're not stupid. Other policies like bringing Merseyrail under public control, amendments to the Hillsborough Law, extending duty of candour, and focus on cost of living measures, bus fare caps. That's going to make a big difference. It will make a difference, don't get me wrong. I'm very grateful for very small mercies, but it is a very small mercy. Prison early release policy and Wes Streeting controversy. We don't like Wes Streeting. He's another friend of Mandelson's, and they would just want you to forget all about Mandelson and all the things that he did. And they would just want you to forget about his ties to Epstein. We're not going to forget. We're not stupid, and stop treating us like mushrooms. Significant backlash over the government's early prisoner release scheme to address overcrowding. A video showed Defence Secretary Wes Streeting and others, including Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, who is remaining in position. I can't believe Burnham isn't getting rid of her. Sorry, I digress. Joking about releasing early paedophile, rapist, illegal and terrorists. This drew widespread criticism for insensitivity towards victims. Of course it would. Of course it would. But why does it not surprise me that they're the ones they're releasing? Paedophiles, rapists, illegals and terrorists. Let's kick them out of prison. So, people who go around burgling and, let's not just that. Let's lock up let's detain under the Terrorism Act people who fighting against genocidal maniac regime. Let's keep them in prison. Streeting and Mahmood later apologised. Oh, I bet that was sickening, calling it a light-hearted reference with no ill intent. Conservatives like Kemi Badenoch condemned it amid opposition to the policy. Of course she did. Anything she can jump onto to get Labour a little bit flustered, she's going to. She's another staunch Zionist. They all are. Ongoing small boat immigration and asylum concern. Continued arrivals of undocumented migrants via small boats remains a hot topic in independent commentary. Post highlighted it as normalised issue, with local tensions, e.g. asylum seekers versus village residents in places like Piddington, the broader warnings about demographic and cultural impacts. Nigel Farage and others reference long-term concerns about the UK's direction. If the UK's direction included pulling out of wars that we really don't and shouldn't have our hands in, so that these people do not feel the need to leave their countries to come to our country because we are supplying arms, because we are supplying technology, because we are supplying intel to the countries that are terrorizing their country, then they would come. So yet again, we're looking at a symptom. We're not looking at the cause of the symptom. And we're trying to put a band-aid on an arterial bleed. The arterial bleed being we need to pull out of when any country that we are involved in supplying anything to when it comes to war, because the citizens don't want it. And they're doing it behind closed publications that we're not allowed to see, like this Israeli Defence Treaty Agreement that we're not allowed to see, because it's a point of national security. Of course it is. Andrew Tate extradition developments. Discussions around the potential extradition of Andrew and Tristan Tate from the US to the UK. A Trump administration official indicated the US would honour the treaty, though internal views from Marco Rubio were noted as negative towards the Tates. Well, I don't know anything about the Tates. I saw something flash up on social media, and it was some man who was acting like a bit of a pillock, really, for clicks, obviously. And he was all like, he's doing his typical, he's British, so I'm presuming it was Andrew Tate, and his brother, I think, is Tristan. But he was just doing a Jack the Lad, he was being a dickhead. And it might well appeal to his age group, but it certainly didn't appeal to me. It just cemented, no, that's why I don't watch shit like that, because he was acting like an idiot, and it was just for clicks. You could tell he wasn't coming out. If this was an influential person, then they would come out on what I would class are pressing topics when it comes to politics and geopolitics and lobbying and other countries' involvement in our country. And it wasn't anything like that. I don't think he was like showing how he could shoot a gun. It's like, oh, delightful. Other notable mentions: Rochdale grooming gangs. That's been covered by Mr. Rupert Lowe. Coverage of a Pakistani leader of grooming gangs released after 15 years and housed near victims and schools. That makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Perfect sense. Various local stories: Thames water restrictions, I've spoken about that, energy drink bans for under 16s, and health cases, Ebola monitoring, and sports, Chelsea transfers. I'm going to look at the femicide thing over 66, I think. I'm going to look at that from a health and wellbeing point of view. I'm going to expand upon that and do a bit of a dive research-wise, because I think that's going to be quite interesting. And from my point of view, it's something that I would follow up. The rest of it is all political and just general, trying to not get you to look. Don't look there, look here. That's what that's all about at the moment. So, yeah, and that's about the only thing that I'm going to look at when it comes to the news for this past 7 days, the femicide piece. So, I'm really eternally optimistic And when it comes to our politics, I'm not sitting here. I know I moan a lot about our politics, but I'm not sitting here moaning thinking, oh God, nothing's going to change. We've got to accept it. I'm sitting here moaning because the more you moan, the more people listen. And it's true. Like, I've been talking with people and saying to them when they're like, oh, we won over the digital ID. I was like, go and look at Gareth Icke. Like, I follow Gareth Icke. A lot of people have a bit of a problem with the Ickes. I don't, because a lot of what Gareth and his father have been talking about has come to pass. So we find these things out along the trot. They were just ahead of their time. And even this week, I was sitting there thinking, they're not dropping digital ID. This is lip service. This is lip service. And I caught one of Gareth Icke's posts on his YouTube channel, and he said exactly the same. So I'm in good company. I'm not the only person that thinks this. And they are trying. It's another form of gaslighting. It's another form of gaslighting that they expect you to swallow. They expect you to believe it. And I am now firmly in the camp, and I'm going to do it as a sign off, I think, for every news hub. I'm firmly in the camp of power to the people, and together we rise.